So let's see how typecasting works in Python. Okay. So before I start, entire lecture slides as well as lecture notes will be provided to you in the description. Please go through it. Don't write the notes. Second thing is, I will be very slow while talking. So please watch my videos at 2x speed. That will save your time. Okay. So now what is typecasting? Typecasting means generally when you have an integer, if you want to convert it to a float, or when you have a float, if you want to convert it to integer. Sometimes what happens is, if you have a program and input will be given to the program, and let us say the input is given in form of strings. Now you have to add all those strings, which are numbers actually, and produce the output. Now that is where you have to transform all the float into numbers, integers. That is called typecasting. So basically typecasting is also known as type conversion, is a process of converting the value of one type to other type, which means you can convert from float to int or into float, something like that. Python supports both implicit and explicit typecasting. Implicit means on its own. Implicit means on its own. Explicit means you have to do it separately. That is the meaning of it. Okay. Implicit means you don't have to do it specifically. It will be done for you. Explicit means you have to do it. Okay. So Python has both implicit and explicit. Now for example, if x equal to 5, then x is an integer, 5 is an integer. Now converting it to float results in 5.0. You can convert it into a string, result in 5 like this. So if I put a number like this, and if I put quotes like this, that is a float. Now, why do we need typecasting is, sometimes the data will come from different sources in different formats, and you want one format for all of them to process. For example, let us say you have Raspberry Pi. Let us say you have some sensors. From the sensors you are getting data. One sensor is giving you integer, other sensor is giving you float, other sensor is giving you, let us say, string, which is a number. Now you have to convert all of them into integers, and you have to work on the processing them, right? So that is where typecasting is going to be helpful. Now operations require sometimes consistent data types. Then also we need, which means all the data types have to be same. Then also we need typecasting. If a number is in a string format, then it must be typecasted to an integer or a float to do some operation on it. For example, let us say 5 is in string format. How do I know 5 is in string format? See, when you write like this, 5, either like this, or when you write like this, 5, like this, then that is a string. That is a string. Okay. Now you need to typecast this string to an integer. Now you need to typecast a string to an integer. So Python automatically converts smaller data types to larger data types. What does that mean? Let us assume that x equal to 7. In this case, x is an integer. Let us assume that y equal to 3.5. In this case, 3.5 is a float. Now let us assume that we are doing x plus y. Right? Now what will happen? Because of this is, even x will be converted to a float, and then the addition will take place. You are not doing this conversion. It is automatically done by Python. That is why it is called implicit conversion. Even though x is an integer, it will internally be converted to a float, and then float addition will happen. That is why you are seeing the result type as float and the result as a float. Now explicitly also you can do conversion by using these functions. If you want to convert something to integer, you can use int. If you want to convert something to float, you can use float. Something to string, you can use string. Something to boolean, you can use boolean. These are all explicit type conversions. If you want to do it on your own, you can do it. Now we can use str to convert an integer into a string. Let us say there is an integer called age 25. So from next time this could be bigger. This could be bigger. Okay. So age is currently 25. Now you are actually converting that age into a string by using str function. Now we have str function and you have age in it. Now what will happen? This will be converted to a string. An integer is converted to a string. Now if you see the type of it, it will be a string. Similarly, here age is an integer which is converted to a float. Now if you see the type of the age, that will show you as float. Now let's take an example of a number. Now number is 42. What is type of the number? It is a string. See, if you write like this, 42 like this will become a string. Single quotes or double quotes if you put, it will become a string. That is why 42 is here a string. Now we will convert it into integer and float. How can we convert it into integer and float? So one way is you can use int directly. To convert it into integer, you can use int function directly, right? Then what happens? The number 40, the string 42 is converted to an integer, and that is why if you see the type of the integer string, it is coming as an integer, right? Now, if it is a number, if it is a string, 42 is a string, you can convert it into a float by using the float function, by passing it to the float function. And if you see the type of the final variable, that is float string, it is float. Now let us take one example where the string is a number, where 42.1. Okay, what I mean to say here is there is a floating point number which is a string. See, 42.0 is a floating point number now which is a string. Now if you see the type of it, it will show as string. Now let's try to convert it into a float and a int. Okay, now 42.0 is a string. 42.0 is a string, and then float. If you convert it into a float using float function, it will convert without any problem. So what I mean to say is, if there is a string which contains a float, if you try to convert it into a float, without any problem it will get converted. But there is a problem when you do it for an integer. So all that I am teaching this is to arrive at that point. Okay, the point is, when there is a string which is a float, if you are directly converting it into an integer, then there will be a error, value error. What does that mean? You cannot convert a string which is an integer, a string which is a float into an integer directly. So let me write it here clearly. Let us say there is a string which contains a floating point number. Okay, now you can convert it directly to float. This is allowed, but you cannot convert it directly to an integer. If you have to convert it to an integer, first convert it into float and then convert that float into integer. This step is required. This is a very popular interview question. No one will be able to answer this at least without knowing all this. Okay. For this concept, I think you should do a like on this video. Now, when you try to convert a string into a float using the same method, the conversion will be successful. If you want to convert this string 42.0 to float, it will work. But if you try to convert a string which is containing a float and into an integer, this method will throw an error. That we have already seen it, right? Now, explicit typecasting, we can typecast from float to int using integer, which means if you have a floating point value, for example 42.0 is a floating point value, right? Now we can typecast it into integer by writing like this 42.0 and then you can write int of floating value. Float value is 42.0. Now int of float value, if you write, it is going to give us the float value, integer version of the float value, right? So what is it? It will be 42. And what is the type of it? It is now converted to integer. Passing floating value in integer will work. So which means you can pass floating values to integer function, but then you cannot pass the strings, right? It will not work when you pass strings. So just to summarize what I told you, if you have a built-in function int, now into int, you can send a float value. This will not create any problem. You can send a string value also. This will not create any problem. But if this string is containing a floating point number, that will give you an error. If this is containing an integer, it will not create any problem, or any other number type, it will not create any problem. But if it contains float, then it will create a problem. Okay, right? And now if you have a number pi 3.14125, now if you convert it into integer, then everything will be truncated. It is not rounding off, it is truncated, right? And here also 3.999, it will be truncated. Everything will be truncated. Okay. So what I mean to say here is that whenever a float is converted into an integer, it is truncated, not rounded. Rounding is different, right? And truncation is different. Truncation means just simply ignore them. That is truncating. Okay. We will see what are the special types of typecasting now. Now we shall see some interview questions. So what are the kind of interview questions that they can ask on this concept is, Python only performs implicit casting between compatible types. For example, integer and float are compatible. That is why implicitly it will do the casting. For example, if you write x equal to 8, which is an integer, and y equal to 2.4, which is a float, and when you try to add them, it will implicitly convert the integer into a float. See, this is implicit. And mixing incompatible types like strings and integer will throw an error unless explicitly typecasted. What does it mean? For example, x is a number, integer 10, and fruits is a string apples. If I try to add a string with a number, it will obviously give error, right? So this kind of typecasting will not happen. From next time, increase the font of it. Okay. So this kind of typecasting will not happen, right? What you should be doing is explicitly you should do typecasting. Implicit typecasting will give you error. If you try to do this, you are going to see type error, unsupported operand type error. Okay. So for plus, you are giving integer and string which are unsupported operand types. Then typecasting, this will work. If you try to do explicit typecasting, it will work. So what do I mean by explicit is you are converting them explicitly, right? So for example, X here is, let us say the previous example, right? What was the previous example? X is 10, right? Okay, X is 10. X is 10 and fruits is nothing but apples. Fruits is apples is the fruits. Fruit is a string and X is 10. Now I am converting X into a string. If I write str of X, it means that X is converted into a string. Now you can easily do typecasting. Okay, so after this explicit typecasting is over, you can do addition, which is going to give you 10 apples. Okay, and typecasting can be done even for Boolean values. So in Boolean values, true is always treated as 1 in the numerical context. Okay, so what does that mean? If there is a variable called flag and if there is true, if there is a variable called flag, whose Boolean value is true, if I try to typecast it into an integer, the value of that will be 1, which means, simply put, true is equivalent to 1 even it is converted to a number. That is simple words. Now if you convert true to float, it will be 1.0, right? So true to integer, I mean a Boolean type to integer where true is converted will give you 1. When true is converted to a float, then it will give you 1.0. So either it will be 1 or 1.0 depending on where you are converting. You are converting it to integer or you are converting it to float. Now typecasting Boolean value. For example, if you have a string, if you take a string, if you take true, a flag true, and if you try to convert it into a string, it will give you true only. Within quotes, it will give you true. It will not give you 0 or 1, which means when you are trying to convert a Boolean type into a string, you are just going to get the name of the Boolean type. Either it will be true or it will be false. Now when you typecast false, it will be 0, right? So when you take false and when you try to convert it into integer explicitly typecasting, then it will give you 0. Now similarly, when you are typecasting false, it will give you 0.0. So typecasting a Boolean type, let us say you are taking a Boolean variable false and you are trying to convert it into a string explicitly, then what do you get? You get the string false, same like true. Okay. Now conversion between different numerical types can also happen by using these functions, right? For example, you can convert a number to binary by using bin of x. What is a binary number? You know that, right? There will be only two symbols, 0 and 1. Only 2 digits. Now when you write oct of x, when you write oct, OCT, that will convert a binary number into octal number. OCT will convert a binary number, any number, not just binary number, any number. I can say a base 10, I can say a base 10 number to a octal number. Hex will convert a base 10 number to a hexadecimal number. You know what is hex. I'm not going to details of what is binary number, what is octal number, what is hexal number. These are not asked in the interview, not required. Okay. So for a given decimal number, if you try to apply binary, then 10 will be converted to 1010. If you try to apply octal, to 10, it will be converted to 00112. If you try to convert into hexadecimal, it will convert A into 10. And conversion between different numerical types. So you can convert, you can just see this as an example. If x is equal to 10, you can write bin 10, oct 10, hex 10. You are going to get binary, octal and hexa. But then when you are seeing the output, it will be written in a somewhat some mystic way, right? Whenever any number starts with 0b, it is binary. Whenever any number starts with 0 o, it is octal. Whenever any number starts with 0 x, it is hexadecimal. That is why for 10 we are getting these three values, but then the first two symbols you have to ignore and the remaining symbols you have to talk about. Okay. Now we will see there are some challenges coming to applying these numbers. When you are talking about bin, oct and hex, there is something that you should not do. These functions like bin, oct and hex do not work for floating point numbers and strings. You have to understand this. What do I mean by that is, you cannot convert a floating point number into binary, octal or hexa, and similarly you cannot convert a string into binary, octa or hexa. This is a very important interview question. Okay, for this question you should like this video. Please type on the like button. Okay, so I will tell you why. So here x equal to 10.5. 10.5 is a floating point number, right? 10.5 is a floating point number, right? Now when you are writing bin of x, oct of x, hex of x for floats, all of them will fail. You cannot convert a floating point number into bin, binary, oct, octadecimal, hexadecimal. You cannot convert it. Remember that. Okay. Similarly, even if you take a string, and if you try to convert it into binary, octal or hexa, it will not happen. It will give you error. Very important interview questions. Okay. Functions like bin, oct and hex only work with integer values, and they do not work with floating point values or floating numbers or string types. Okay. So these are the important interview questions that they may ask. Okay. Now let's see the remaining interview questions. Okay. So when I say that a string is not converted to an integer, it does not mean that there is no way. For example, when I say that a string cannot be converted to binary or octal or hexa, it does not mean that there is no way to convert it. So what you can do is, you can first take a string, convert it to an integer, and now from integer you can convert anywhere. Either you want to convert to binary, or you want to convert to octal, or you want to convert to hexa. So from a string, take it to integer, and from an integer you can convert to any one of them. This is a very popular interview question. Now, string should represent a valid number, otherwise it cannot be converted to an integer. The reason is, see, if you write s like that, s equal to 10. Okay, if there is a number 10. Now, if you are trying to convert this into an integer, it happens without any problem. But if s is instead of 10, if the s is ABC, if the s is ABC, and if you are trying to convert it into a string, if the s is ABC, and if you are trying to convert it into a string, that there will be a problem. Sorry, into an int, there will be a problem. Okay. You cannot convert a string into an int directly or explicitly or implicitly. You cannot do that. Now, coming to typecasting, you can also typecast a tuple into a list into a tuple, right? For example, let us say we have a list. A list is containing 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now you don't know what is a list. We didn't discuss about it. Later I will talk about it. So anything when you write within the square braces become a list. Okay, we will talk about it later. Now a list can be converted into a tuple by using explicit typecasting, right? So tuple of L means we are converting the list into a tuple, right? Now similarly we can do the same for set also, right? For example, if L is a list, now if you want to convert it into a set, next time you increase the size of it. Okay, so if you want to convert it into a set, L is a list, and if you want to convert it into a set, you can use the function set, right? Then it will be converted. So these are the popular functions. These are the popular built-in functions, right? So guys, I and my team are working really hard to make it the best course available in the internet. I'm not saying that this is the best course in the world, but we are putting our 100% to give you the best, to make it the best, right? And all that I ask from you is, guys, please subscribe to the channel, talk about it with your friends, just spread awareness about it, write some comments that will increase the reach. Okay, thank you. If you want to take my GATE classes, we go to the website ravindrababu.ravula.in and you are going to see all my GATE classes available there. Okay, so coming to the classes, they are all recorded. Why am I doing recorded? Why am I not doing live classes? Is I have thousands of students registering for my courses every year, but then if I conduct a live class, only 20 or 30 people will be there. 20 or 30, that's it. Maximum is 40 I had. The reason is live classes are little bit wasting your time. See, you cannot watch a live class at 2x speed. You have to watch at the pace at which I teach. Generally, I will be very, very slow while teaching. So if you can go through the live classes, you can watch them at 2x speed and you can complete the syllabus very fast. 400 plus hours content is there for GATE. And if you are going to watch them at normal pace, it will take 400 hours. But if you watch it at 2x speed, it will take just 200 hours, right? So if you want any of my GATE classes, GATE Computer Science or GATE DA, the price is just 10,000 rupees. It is very, very reasonable for the kind of quality we provide. We have test series, we have doubt sessions, we have videos, we have lecture notes for everything. Even you don't have to write any lecture notes. I will provide you lecture notes for every subject. You just have to sit back, watch the videos at 2x speed and revise the notes. Short notes will be provided, long notes will be provided, formulas will be written in the separate notes. Everything will be there provided to you. You don't have to work hard. And coming to, if you are planning to go abroad, we also have study abroad program. You can go through my number. My number is on WhatsApp. My WhatsApp number is in the website. If you are planning to do masters abroad, that is a very good choice. It is better than doing masters in India. So if you are planning to go abroad, we will help you out right from taking the passport to getting the visa, US visa, right? So we will help you out in the entire process. Okay. So do visit the website, see what is happening there. Even DSA course is there for 5,000 rupees, which is both in Python and C++. Okay. So thank you so much.